Lindsey, and I personal train clients. I do nutrition coaching. My passion is really using food as medicine, which I'm sure Justine is also very passionate about that as well. I have a very strong passion for gut health and thyroid health. Just going through my own journey, I had a bunch of health issues and decided to leave my meteorology career to pursue what I believe is my true calling, which was getting myself healthy so that I could help others get healthy. And it's been a really, really cool journey because I've been able to help so many people feel better. And I just remember helping my first client back years ago. And just the feeling that I got from it was like nothing else that I had ever gotten in my meteorology career. It was like, okay, I can tell someone if it's going to rain and help them not get rained on, but I can't give someone their life back in this career. I guess I could have like saved someone from a tornado, but I just feel like this is just such a rewarding career. So we're really excited to share our knowledge. And, I believe you guys can type in the chat as well. So you are all knowledgeable as well, being on this journey of health. Everyone has knowledge. So if there's anything you want to contribute, then feel free to type in the chat box. But Justine, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. Sounds good. So my story is very similar, right? Mm-hmm. I had a lot of health problems for a lot of years, and finally someone showed me the light and taught me the ways, and things really started to get better. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for me, just like you described, helping someone change their lives. Mm-hmm. It's like I still, I've been doing this a lot of years, and I still will come out of a meeting with a client and hear about what's going on, the improvements going on in their life. Now I'm mm-hmm. I'm smiling from ear to ear. Yeah. So it's really, I tell people all the time, I have the best job in the world. Yeah. It's true. It is true. Yeah. I'm Justine from Ann Arbor Holistic Health, and we do functional medicine. So essentially we help people who have, and for the most part, who have had some kind of chronic illness for a long time. And in a lot of cases, folks have been down the road of seeing lots of doctors. They've seen this specialist and that specialist and tried medications, and just haven't seen the results they're looking for. We all want to just feel good every day when we wake up and have the energy to sail through our days. And for a lot of us, that's just not what reality is.
No. And I feel like especially today. Yeah. Especially today, there's just such a dire need for this information. So yeah, I'm glad we're here doing it.
Yeah. So that's what our office does, is we help people learn how to get healthy in whatever ways we can.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's dive into the questions.
Let's go.
So we got, by the way, y'all did a great job asking questions. We got so many good questions that we do not have time to go through all of them today. So we're going to get through as many as we can. And if we didn't answer your question, we're going to be doing another one of these and possibly multiple in the near future. So we hope to get to everyone's question at some point. Yep. We will do our best today. We wanted to start with a question on AIP. The question is it bad for your microbiome to be on a restrictive diet like AIP long term? How long can you stay on an AIP diet? This is a great question with so many angles. So Justine and I are just going to talk kind of back and forth. I'm going to say a few opening sentences and then let her jump in and we'll share our expertise together. So this is a question that I can tell comes from someone that is very knowledgeable on the fact that one of the foundational pieces of our health is including a diversity of foods in our diet, specifically plant-based foods. But with that being said, I know a lot of times they'll be like, it's very important to include plant-based foods in your diet, and people mistake that for you should be vegetarian. That's not what I'm saying, but it is very important to include a diversity of plant-based foods in your diet. Now, with AIP, it can be restrictive. So my recommendation is to stick with it for perhaps 6 months. And I'm going to actually have you jump in a second to see if you have a different take, like should someone stay with it longer, but 6 months, general rule of thumb, and then start reintroducing some of the foods that are maybe less problematic, like small amounts of high quality legumes, perhaps, or high quality, like a soaked pinto bean or pressure cooked in a soaked pinto beans, or flax seeds, like some of these foods that are actually so healthy for us that we may suffer if we are too restrictive, and see how your body does with those. So that's my general recommendation. Like I will say I am almost fully AIP, and I have been for about 10 years now. I haven't had dairy or gluten for 10 years, but I have reincorporated some small amounts of foods that are not AIP, some small amounts of tomatoes, some small amounts of onions, flax seeds, chia seeds, but I would say like 90% of what I eat is AIP. So what would you maybe change about that, add about that? Because nothing in health is set in stone. Like we're all learning, constantly staying up on the latest research, and it's always changing. So what of that, where are you like, no?
Well, so not only is the research constantly changing on us, but also every human is different, right? Every biology is different. So there is, like what is the one best diet? There is no such thing.
Exactly.
But ultimately, my opinion is that someone could eat AIP forever and be in a good place.
Okay.
It's, because it's AIP, the AIP diet does really two things. It reduces foods that cause inflammation. So it takes the burden off of the body. And then it also focuses on foods that are really nutrient dense. And so for the most part, my feeling is that with all of the AIP foods out there, that we are eliminating some really nutrient dense things. Like you mentioned, legumes and some things from the nuts and seed family are really nutrient dense as well. But ultimately, I feel as though we could get by on just AIP forever.
And that's another really important topic is, so I sometimes ask the question, what is the difference between surviving and thriving? And I think that for many people, they probably could, like you're saying, thrive on AIP for life. I think there might be, and this is all like, hypothesis based on what I've read. This is nothing like, yes, research says this. I sometimes wonder if subsets of the AIP community could thrive more if they did have, for example, like the hormone balancing properties of the flax seeds and some of the good nutrients in the legumes. So, but like you said, everyone's different. So some people maybe actually would be better suited to do AIP for life, just to avoid anything that's inflammatory and irritating to the gut. And then maybe some people, as they heal, maybe they put some of their autoimmune condition at bay and remission, and then they're able to start reincorporating some things.
Some of those foods, they're no longer inflammatory. If you do enough work to really build health, some of those foods that are inflammatory for folks and is the reason why people move toward the AIP diet, they become a non-issue anymore. The lectins in legumes, they're no longer a source of inflammation. It's no longer something that really overburdens the body.
Yeah. And I also love the saying, the dosage makes the poison, right? So because a big concept in paleo is avoid lectins because they're irritating to the gut. And while that is true, we also do know that some of the lectin containing foods also offer many health benefits. So it could very well be that small amounts are actually optimal for some people, whereas others that have a very flared up state might need to just do away with it altogether for an extended period of time. But that's a really good point, that it's like, as you heal, something that was once an issue is no longer an issue. Great point.
Yeah. And I loved your point too about the seeds for supporting hormones, right? We know that seed cycling really supports hormones. So it really, again, just drives home the point that like there is no one diet that's the holy grail for everyone.
So we got through one question. 50 questions. Yes, go us.
You know what? I felt like that question, some of our answers really led us to another question that was on this list, which was asking about reintroducing foods, right? And so the AIP diet, while I believe that it could be done by someone forever, for most people, it's not meant to be a long-term diet, right? So we're doing it for a month, or we're doing it for 3 months. And then at some point, there's this idea that you start to reintroduce foods. And so in my opinion, there's a pretty particular way that's the best way to reintroduce foods. And Lindsey, I would love to hear what you have to say on this too.
So I'll say that. Do you want to start? I don't
go
mind.
for it.
Okay. So the standard way to reintroduce food is typically, let's say you've been at AIP for an extended period of time, let's say several months. You would pick, let's say you want to, now I'm not a huge fan of like gluten, and we can talk about that in a second. But I think for some people, like for example, the clients that I work with, they're not all AIP. They don't all have an autoimmune. So some I'm cool with them having, some high quality grains and gluten products. But let's say we're picking gluten to reintroduce. So the rule of thumb is you don't introduce multiple foods at one time. That's really important because to really get solid data here. We are scientists. To get solid data, you can't introduce too many variables. So you can't be AFP and then the next day go eat like a cheese pizza and like, have peanut butter for dessert and then try to figure out what you're sensitive to because you just introduced too many things. So you pick, let's say it's gluten and you're going to reintroduce bread. You have some bread the next day. And the goal is to have it at multiple points throughout the day so that you have large enough amounts. You're not just eating like a little bite of bread the next day and seeing what happens, because it can take several days for you to eat that food and then the symptoms to manifest. So let's say you've been AIP, the next day you're like, all right, I'm going to have my bread today. I'm going to have my I was going to say peanut butter and jelly, but if you've been avoiding nuts, so maybe you're having a turkey sandwich, right? And then you have some more bread, like some bread for dinner. Maybe you're having some pasta without the cheese. And then you just see what happens. Does the brain fog return? Do the digestive issues return? Do you have a flare up in symptoms and a drain of energy? Now, don't introduce that next food yet. Like, let's say you're going to introduce dairy next. Don't introduce that yet for at least 3 days. And some people have different opinions. Some people say it should go longer, which is where we're going to get Justine's take on this as well. And you do one at a time systematically. This is where it can really help to work with someone, because this can be very overwhelming. Like, it can be so overwhelming for someone. And if you just have someone to say, okay, you're going to do this day, you're going to do that day, and then you're going to check in with me, it can really make the process so much simpler because you have to reintroduce one at a time. How do you typically do it?
So that's exactly it.
Okay.
Right. So one ingredient at a time. And when we talk about ingredients, so we don't mean like you add a jar of Prego sauce or whatever it is, right? Because that's 35 ingredients, not one ingredient. My preference is for people to add in paleo foods when they're introducing from AIP, right? So something from the legume family or the nuts and seeds family.
That's a good point.
Eggs is another one, which especially if you've been AIP for some time, just the convenience and the
I miss eggs.
inexpensive quality to eggs.
Now it's a
are,
perk.
People are dying to have eggs back.
Yeah.
So eggs is a good one. Although I will tell you, when people reintroduce eggs, roughly 50%, it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
So and the same thing, a lot of people will say, I'm dying to have tomatoes back. I want to reintroduce that one first. Or the same thing about chickpeas. I'm like, those ones don't usually go so great.
Yeah, I know. I've had to come to terms with the no egg thing as well. Yeah, I've had to come to terms with no eggs, no dairy, no gluten. Those are my things. But just because they're my things doesn't mean that they're your things. But yeah, I've had to. Yeah, I agree with that.
So, and I like to do it for a period of about 4 days. And just like Lindsey said, so you have a little bit of that food a couple of times a day, over 3 or 4 days. And the reason we do that is because food sensitivities, the symptoms that show up, they don't necessarily show up right away, right? And so it can be really delayed. And that's why it's really hard to pick up on food sensitivities. Is because sometimes the headache or the brain fog or the being cranky or the being tired or the, bloating or whatever's going on, sometimes it doesn't happen for a day or 2 days or 3 days.
Yeah.
And so who can remember what they had 3 days ago? I can't remember what I ate 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And so that's why we do just the one ingredient. And so what I always tell, or skin eruptions too, if you break out with acne or you get a rash or anything. So what I always do is to tell people in the reintroduction phase, you want to keep a little journal. Like, did anything come up that was out of the ordinary? And if it did, that's how you know that food is no good for you. That's how you identify, okay, I tried eggs. When I tried eggs, my eczema flared back up or my bloating came back. And so you take eggs back out, give yourself a day or so to rest, your body to rest, and then you try the next food, introducing the next one.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I touched on the gluten thing, and I did know that someone asked a question about gluten, but did you have another finishing point about reintroduction before I jump to that? Okay.
Yeah.
So someone asked about gluten and why gluten is bad. How does gluten contribute to leaky gut? So this is a really interesting topic to me. And I've read up on a lot of the research, and something that really stood out to me, it was where some of the researchers are talking about, because we've heard about people, tell me if you've heard about this, that go to Europe and, oh, wow, I ate the pasta in Europe and I was fine. And I eat the pasta here and I just feel terrible.
Yeah.
Well, there are genetic differences in how the grains are made here. And some of the researchers are hypothesizing that it's the genetic modifications to these grains and the proteins in the grains that have made it so far removed from what our ancestors once ate. And our body does not recognize this. And especially for someone with an autoimmune disease whose system is so ready to like just attack anything you throw at it, it's like, if your body has something that it perceives as foreign, like some of these proteins in these grains that have been so genetically modified, it's going to heighten your immune system and your body is going to just mount this immune response and you're going to feel like garbage. And so gluten can be very irritating to the gut lining. Now, like I just said, like it's not like every single client I get if they're not autoimmune, it's not like I'm eliminating gluten from everyone, but I do think that that eat for everyone, having it at least in moderation would be a good idea, and not, consuming like these copious amounts of wheat products, especially non-organic and then the GMO wheat products. So that's my take on it. What do you typically tell your clients when it comes to gluten?
Yeah. So I'm a little more hardcore about it.
Oh, good. Let's hear it.
So gluten, what we know gluten does. So I'm going to get a little nerdy for a minute. So we have our gut is a tube, right? It's a big, long tube. And so in that tube is the food we've eaten. And so gluten is one of those foods. And on the edges of our intestines and our whole digestive tract, it's a single cell thick. The cells are really pressed up tight against one another. When gluten moves through, it causes the leaky gut phenomenon to happen. So leaky gut essentially is a tiny little gap, or sometimes a really big gap opens up between the cells. And normally any food passing through, your digestive tract gets to decide what happens to those food particles. And so good ones, vitamins and minerals and good things, the cell says, yes, you get to move through into the bloodstream, and the cell decides that. And other things that are just going to be turned into waste and moved out of the body, right, just keeps on moving through the system. When gluten comes along, though, it opens up a little gap between those cells. And now things literally slip through the cracks. And so things that are not supposed to be getting into the bloodstream get into the bloodstream.
Right.
And so that happens. The research today tells us that happens for every single human when we eat gluten, or at least when we eat American GMO gluten.
Right.
So that happens for every human. And so the more sensitive we are, the bigger the gap is, and the longer it takes for that gap to heal itself back up.
Yeah.
The research today tells us that it takes, depending on sensitivity level, as much as 2 years from a single serving of gluten,
right,
for that leaky gut to heal itself back up. And that leaky gut, when the cells open up and things get into the bloodstream, that's when your immune system starts to really go haywire.
Yeah.
Right. And because suddenly there's something in the bloodstream that's not supposed to be there. And if it were a pathogen, that could be really, really dangerous. So your body says, oh, panic, everybody go on attack. And it's your immune system sends out all its little soldiers. And that's what makes the immune system sort of overburdened, and to start to not be so discerning about what it attacks. And that's when we start to develop other food sensitivities and autoimmune conditions in general.
Yeah. So I think some of these points you're making are great. Like if someone does have an autoimmune condition, it may very well be that this person needs to come to terms with, hey, I'm just not going to be having gluten. Like it's just not going to be part of my diet. I'm kind of curious to know if anyone on this does not have an autoimmune. Does everyone on here have an autoimmune? Feel free to type in the chat if you have an autoimmune condition, if you want to share what it is, or if you don't have an autoimmune condition. And I guess the reason I'm a little bit more lax on it with some people is the people that don't have the autoimmune, and going back to the dosage making the poison. But even the people that don't have an autoimmune, that I encourage them to eat lower amounts. I also do believe that it's really important to pay attention to the quality of the grains. I think that's really what makes the difference. And because if you're not careful, if you have this autoimmune condition, let's say you go gluten, dairy free, you're AIP, and then this happens to so many people, you start to feel good and you just kind of, get a little lax in your ways. And then you're like, oh, I'll just have a piece of bread here and a piece of pizza next week. And then before you know it, you reach the tipping point.
Yeah.
And so I do think that with people with autoimmune disease, I always I prefer typically to call it an autoimmune condition because it's like,
Yep.
I don't want to go around saying I have a disease. I have an
Right.
autoimmune condition. That sounds so much more friendly for those people. And this is why I've personally chosen that I'm just never going to eat gluten again, I don't think. And I'm okay with that. So I think it's been a solid 11 years since I've had dairy or gluten. And I don't know if I'll ever want to have it again. I
Yeah.
just don't know.
It's,
So,
you get used to it. I know
Yeah.
going gluten-free is really, really hard when people
Yeah.
first get started. The good news is though, you do get used to it.
You do.
You get used to not there's not even a desire for me anymore. It's been so long. It's been actually almost the same. It's been
Yeah.
a little over 10 years for
Good
me.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also there are a million really good gluten-free products out
Can
there
we
these
talk-
days that are so much. 10 years ago, it was like a death sentence.
It was. And can we talk about, I love the pot pie. I don't know if you've had a chance to try it. You mentioned the loaded baked potato soup. You mentioned that, and it's funny.
Baked sweet potato, actually.
That's it.
AIP. Yeah.
Baked sweet potato soup, right? And so that's one of the meals that Paleo On The Go offers. And I think when you had mentioned that, I had it defrosting and I was about to go eat it. And then I ate it shortly after we had talked. I was like, she was right. This is good.
It's
So
good.
I ordered some more. It was so good. But I feel like those pot pies are delicious and you don't even miss the old thing. You really don't. And actually, someone asked a question about that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it because we have like papers here, but I can remember it. They were basically saying, okay, is it really good for me to be eating all of these baked goods?
Right.
So I had a couple thoughts on it that I'll share. And then if you want to jump in as well.
Yeah.
So as far as the baked goods go, because I have this, we'll call it a rule for myself. And for clients, I try not to give people rules because I try not to be so overbearing, but I do give guidelines, and I do highly recommend that the protein contains that the breakfast contains that the protein contains breakfast, that the breakfast contains protein. And so, but I also love these baked goods, and I recommend every meal has some protein to balance the blood sugar. And so this is what I've been doing, and I love it. I have an AIP compliant protein powder, and I mix it with frozen bananas, and I take a quarter of, I think the banana streusel was the last one I used. I take a serving as a quarter of it. So I take a quarter of it. I have a picture I post. Oh no, I haven't posted it yet. I'm going to post it on my social media soon. So I take a quarter of it, and then I make this ice cream out of frozen banana and protein. It's just a little frozen banana and coconut milk, and it's mostly protein powder. And I make like this brownie ice cream for breakfast, and it's AIP compliant and it's delicious. And yes, I love that. So my recommendation is, if you're balancing this in a meal with protein, and if you're not eating it like every day, because you definitely want your nutrient dense foods, you want your vegetables, you can't eat this at the expense of vegetables. And I would also add, if someone is on a lower calorie intake, you're not going to be able to enjoy these foods as much because the vegetables have to come first. I think the reason why I'm able to afford it is because I actually have to eat super high calorie right now as part of my healing journey. So actually right now I'm eating like 2,300 calories a day. It's a lot of food. So I have all these extra calories I need to get in. So for me, I can afford to have things like this. So what is your take? I would imagine for some clients, you'd be like, yeah, right now we're not going to do all the fancy treats right now, but
yeah, it's just like always, it really depends on the person, right? So if you've got challenges with blood sugar or insulin resistance in any way, right, then some of those treats are not ideal. But it really is, it's all about moderation. You heard Lindsey say that she enjoys these treats, but also that she's using a quarter of it, right? Not like that she's eating a whole loaf. And so it really boils down to making sure, like you said, that you're not doing it at the expense of the nutrient dense stuff, right? And so what I will tell people is if you really need a sweet treat, go ahead and have it, but I need you to eat your salad first. I need you to eat your steak first. I need you to eat your good foods first. And then if you still want the treat, then go ahead and have the treat. And I think part of this question too that we got, again, I don't see it.
I'll see if I can find it as you're talking.
But part of the question was related to, because some of the ingredients in some of those things are less nutrient dense, is it really okay? And again, that the answer is the same, is that yes, those things are okay on occasion, but you want to make sure that that's not what you're having for every meal, right? For every meal, we want protein and vegetables, basically. And that's true. I don't know about you, but with my clients, the thing about, I don't know what to eat for breakfast always that is the most common question.
Especially in AIP
about
with no
diet,
eggs.
especially with AIP, especially with no eggs.
So where do you stand on like the AIP compliant protein powders? Is it something that you have clients do from time to time to help them with their breakfast, for example?
Yeah. So breakfast to me is like, the most important thing is it's not any special meal of the day, right? Like you can eat anything for breakfast, just like you would for lunch or dinner.
Yeah, it's all a mental thing, right? We've just conditioned ourselves to think it has has to be cereal or something sweet. So yeah.
So I'm all about some kind of hunk of meat for breakfast. But protein powders are great too, right? If you want to do smoothies or any kind of mixed anything, that's a fantastic option. But ultimately, we want to think of every meal and every snack as a balanced mini meal. Right. So it's got to have fats, good healthy fats. It's got to have proteins, and carbs are fine too. But we want to not be focused on carbs at every meal.
Right. Yeah. I was just thinking about the not remembering the name of it, but it's like the turkey burger cranberry. Do y'all remember what that Paleo On The Go meal is called? It's
I haven't
turkey
had
burger,
that
cranberry, collard greens. What's that one called?
Apple chicken burger.
Yeah, that one. I feel like that makes a good breakfast too. Bacon, apple, chicken burger.
We also have the chicken breakfast sausage as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So those are good options. And sweet potatoes, like chicken breakfast sausage with sweet potato is, and so there's a little bit of controversy on sweet potato, I've heard, being paleo or not. I personally am okay if someone wants to have it. Do you ever find situations where you're like, okay, let's not? I could imagine if someone is having like extreme blood sugar issues, maybe severely diabetic, maybe we're scaling back on that. But are there any other instances where you would say that's not a good idea for someone?
So for me, right, like it's a matter of, if AIP is easy for you, then absolutely do AIP to a T. And really, you can really scrutinize how you eat. But if eating that way feels restrictive, right, then, and we need a little bit of wiggle room, because ultimately we want people to be healthy. We want people to be healthy in every way possible, in the holistic meaning of the word, right?
Mind and soul.
Exactly. So if eating really strict AIP and keeping your carbs really low, or whatever it is your other diet goals are, is really emotionally taxing on you, then it's just trading one stress for another, right? And so expanding your diet a little bit is actually recommended, even if that's not absolutely the best thing you could do for your biochemistry. The fact that it really helps with your emotional well-being plays a major role. And so for me, I think sweet potatoes fine. I think cassava flour is fine. The crust on the pot pies is fine.
Yum, yum.
It's all about moderation. But I also feel like, if eating a restrictive diet is easy for you, then some of these things, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's like a duck, right? So sweet potato technically is not a carb and not inflammatory like a white potato is. And the same thing with like the cassava flour. It is grain-like, right? Even though it is different. Same thing with quinoa. It's grain-like. And so it has some of the same properties as grain, some of the things we're trying to avoid, but it technically does meet the letter of the AIP law, which means the amount of inflammation is pretty low. What it doesn't hit perfectly, check the box on, is that it's not super nutrient dense.
Yeah. And I think this is a really great topic. Someone even asked about how can we not go crazy on this diet? That was one of the questions, like in some shape or form, it was phrased a little bit differently. And something that I started telling clients, I'm like, if anything I'm telling you right now sends your stress through the roof, disregard it, because that I would have never said this like maybe 5 years ago. I would have never said that stress is one of the most important pieces of your health. But today I believe it to my core, how key stress is to our health. And so, alcohol is not good for us typically. Although I'm very interested about how in the blue zones, they do drink copious amounts of red wine and they are very healthy. So that's just an interesting little tidbit.
That's a topic for another webinar.
Yes, that's another webinar. But if you, and this would not be that what I'm about to say may not be for everyone, but there are some people that need to just, stay away from alcohol altogether. But if you want to de-stress and enjoy a glass of red wine, I would say with your family every once in a while, is that going to totally derail your autoimmune journey? Probably not, because if you are always so uptight and stressed about every little thing that you're eating, then that can be way more damaging to your health than if you just had a glass of wine and chilled out.
Absolutely.
I can't believe I still have a hard time
Saying it out loud.
grasping because that was not me. That I was, I would bring my food scale out to dinner and I would, order because when I was competing, I did that and I was very uptight and very anal. And then one day I just had to come to terms with the fact that was destroying my health. And I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And so once I let go of those rigid ways, but still adhering to AIP. Like, I'm not saying I do a free for all, but it was a transformational thing. And so I try to pass that on to clients. And I think once they make that shift, they're very successful in their health journey.
Yeah. Yeah. What I always try to teach people, most of my clients anyway, is if we've done the AIP journey together, that when they sort of graduate from AIP, the end goal is something like 90% paleo.
That's a great idea.
Basically meaning, you're eating these nutrient dense, low inflammation foods for the most part, but that 10%, the opposite of the 90%, it gives you the wiggle room to still go participate in birthday parties and do, family holidays or whatever, or at that every once in a while having that glass of wine, or whatever it might be, right? Because we don't want you to stop living life. Yeah. That does not make a healthy human either. Yeah. And so ultimately it's about keeping it balanced. That's again, moderation. It's all about moderation.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we do one final question?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Someone mentioned in the chat that they had, you asked if anybody has autoimmune conditions.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like someone said they had RA and hydrocinitis suppurativa.
Okay. So we do have autoimmune people in here.
Yeah.
So very important to pay attention to the inflammatory load in the body because so that's one person that has one. Yeah. So, and that's the interesting thing. When we were having the gluten conversation, the interesting thing is, okay, so right now you're with, rheumatoid arthritis or with Hashimoto's, the body's attacking the joints or the thyroid. But if we don't address the root cause, which is calming the immune system, these autoimmune conditions can manifest in many different ways. Today it could be RA, tomorrow it could be Hashimoto's. And until you get to the root cause, which can be greatly helped with, tremendously helped with diet. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you could heal if you had a severe autoimmune. I don't know if you could truly heal from it if you didn't really hone in on your diet. But so all of these autoimmune conditions are essentially like we need to calm the immune system. And they're different beasts, but they're almost like the same beast in one in a weird kind of a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately, when it comes to autoimmunity, it's the body yelling, saying something isn't right here. And like you said, it's a matter of healing the root cause. But what we almost always find is that there isn't one root cause, right? There are many root causes. Yeah. And ultimately the solution is just as varied, right? So it's not just diet is not the solution alone. It's also, you have to get good quality and quantity of sleep, and you have to get the right amount of exercise and the right intensity of exercise. And you have to have good relationships in your life, right? If you have really toxic relationships in your life, that's just as toxic food. Yeah. And so it's really a matter of doing your best in all the areas that you can, and not perfection, right? Our health is like a bank account, and you have to pay enough into it to not be in deficit, but you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be always paying. You have the wiggle room to occasionally have that glass of wine, or to occasionally indulge in this or that. It's just a matter of doing and paying your health bank enough in order for you to be comfortable, and in order for the autoimmune condition to sort of fade away and not really be part of the picture anymore. Yeah,
that's a freeing message. I'm really glad that we got to sneak that one in there. Yeah. So I guess for our final question. Oh, okay. So this, it's kind of, it could be a long one, but I think we could keep it simple. So this question says, I've heard that AIP doesn't work and healing cannot take place if there is an active gut infection. Is that true? So one thing that came to mind when I read that question, because it's a great question, but it's almost as if the question is like, should I even bother doing AIP because I have this gut infection? I would say that to heal the gut infection, it's very important to pay attention to the diet. And depending on the gut infection, and we actually did get a lot of gut questions, I would highly encourage, and this is something maybe we should dive into next time.
Yeah.
There are some really great tests. As a matter of fact, I just wrote a paper on looking at a specific bacterial strain, but on gut testing and on stool testing, which can tell so much great information. I actually just posted the video on my YouTube channel, and I'm going to look into publishing a paper because there's some really just super, super helpful information that if you can get the right tests done to see why is your gut off, it can really take someone that's stuck and just break you through the next level. So I would encourage, maybe we go to gut health, our next one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think, the answer to that question is view the diet as something that can contribute to healing the gut. But granted, you're probably going to, if it's a severe like dysbiotic state imbalance in the bacteria, you're probably going to need some more specialized tests to get to the root cause. Are you not creating enough digestive enzymes? Do you have an overgrowth of a certain kind of bacteria, not enough of another bacteria? And this is another reason why it's important to include diversity of foods, because very easy to develop a dysbiotic state in the gut if you're not including diversity of food. Even though AIP can seem restrictive, you can actually really improve your diversity in AIP. Like who has, because this is something I've really tried to do, who has had chicory root tea, or who's had some of these weird foods like rutabaga. Oh, there's rutabaga in actually one of the Paleo On The Go meals, but who's had some of these weird vegetables? Like I would encourage you to, next time you go to the store, find a vegetable that you haven't eaten maybe ever in a long time and buy it this week and eat it. Don't just buy it and let it mold in the fridge.
Yeah. No, and you don't have to know what to do with it when you buy it. Buy it, take it home, Google it.
Oh, good.
There's the answer for everything is out there.
That's good.
Google will tell you how to take care of it.
Did you have a thought on that? I'll show you the question.
Yeah,
again.
yeah. So my answer is similar to yours, which is, the diet plays a tremendous role in what's going on in your gut. If you have some bigger unfriendly species growing in there, sometimes diet alone can't take care of it. And that's why we do testing, right? That's why we look and we see, what viruses do you have? What bacteria do you have? What parasites do you have? What yeast do you have, right? Is there overgrowth of some things we don't like? But ultimately what it boils down to is if you eat, drive-through burgers and fries, then you have a gut that thrives on drive-through burgers and fries.
Yeah.
If you eat AIP foods, you have a gut of species that thrive on AIP foods. And we just know that the amount of healing that happens when people do AIP, not only to the gut, right? And sometimes, I've worked with folks where they've got symptoms that have been going on for decades and they're a week into AIP. Literally everything is gone.
Yeah.
And I've seen AIP do other tremendous things too. I've seen people, that have had weight challenges and they lose 40 pounds in the first month alone. And we're not talking about calorie restriction at all. That has nothing, there's no portion control. It's just a matter of eliminating the foods that were causing inflammation and focusing on the ones that really give the body the nutrients that it needs.
Yeah. I feel like when you do that, there's almost like a built-in portion control, because the body a healthy body knows what it should be eating. And when you're filling up on protein and fiber, there's just a built-in portion control, and you don't really have to worry about it as much. So yeah, there's so many amazing things, but there's obviously more questions that we did not get to today, but we would love to continue doing this. Is there anything else? They like the bank account analogy.
Thank you.
And
glad to have you here with us.
Yeah. And then there's more gut health stuff. So we'll for sure, I would love to continue the gut health questions. We were asking earlier about how are we going to end this? And there's a little red button right there, end stream, and our questions are answered. So thank you so much, guys. Is there anything else that we need to add?
Nope.
No.
All right. We had a blast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. We'll
Bye.
see you soon. End scene.
It felt more organic to have them end it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,